Hello crafters, this is Yana Smakula. Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going back to stamping and sharing several super easy to make greeting cards featuring some custom geometric floral designs. I have to say, I missed stamping. I have been doing so much die cutting lately, I have forgotten what it feels like to stamp a design and stamp solid designs. I used to love stamping and I used to do a ton of stamping before die cutting, and I have to say I kind of missed it. Now the stamp set I'm creating with today is a new one from Simon Says Stamp called Geo Flower Building Stamp Set, and it is magnificent. When you first look at it, it doesn't seem like much because all you see are just these random shapes. But as you start using it, you realize the brilliance of this set and also its versatility. So you have a bunch of different shapes here, all intended to help you build your own geometric flowers. You have shapes that can be used to stamp leaves, shapes to stamp petals, various size circles to stamp either flower centers or various flower accents. And basically, this is a stamp set that can be used over and over again to create all sorts of different images. I'm not going to say that stamping possibilities with this stamp set are endless, but I will say that you have so many different options with this set. Now, there is a set of coordinating dies available, giving you even more crafting possibilities. I didn't even use the dies today. That's something that I will save for another occasion. I'm just using the stamps. Now, I have done some test stamping to try out various flower shapes and designs, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, you can create so many different funky looking flowers. All of these shapes are separate, so you can really go to town and combine them in different ways. I have selected several colors of ink, basically a color combination for these cards, and I have green, yellow, and peach colors, and there are two shades for each color, a light shade and a medium shade. So very simple designs with very simple color combinations. I will also add white, as I will have white backgrounds, and black, as I will do my sentiment stamping in black, and then some sentiments will be stamped in dark gray. I have my Mini Misty stamping tool, and I pre-cut the Simon Says Stamp 130-pound cardstock to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch panels. You guys know how much I love this paper for stamping. I love it for coloring. It takes ink really well, and I really love using it. It is a little bit on the expensive side, but really worth every penny you pay for it. So for my first card design, I'm creating a landscape design. I'm using the shape with the 6 leaves, and I'm going to use these to stamp the row of leaves for my flowers. So I will have 3 flowers here, each flower with 2 leaves. And I'm stamping these using my darker green color. And since these are brand new stamps, they haven't been used and they haven't been seasoned, I am re-stamping them several times to have a perfect solid ink coverage. And I do that for all of my stamping today. So even though I don't show this on camera, I do double and triple and sometimes even quadruple stamp some of the images. Next, I'm stamping the flower in the center using the half circle shape. And for this, I'm using 2 shades of yellow. So a darker yellow first and then a lighter yellow above it. I'm also adding a circle above the semicircles, and I'm stamping that in a darker peach ink color. Now, this is color Blush from Simon Says Stamp. Probably not peach, although it might be a bit peachy, but it's more of a pink peach color, I think. So these flowers have a very folk artsy look to them because we're using, bold geometric shapes, and they have that folk art look to them. Next, I use the circle with the offset opening, and I stamped that in the same blush color, and then added a circle in the center using the darker yellow ink. Now, these don't have the stems to them. And at first, I kind of wanted to have a stem to these flowers. They looked as if they needed a stem. So I tried drawing a stem using a pencil. Then I looked through my stash to find a skinny line stamp to be able to stamp the stem. And I did that on some of my test pieces. And honestly, I didn't like it. These flowers do look better without the stem. So I guess that's why there is no stem in this stamp set. Your mind sort of continues the design and it envisions the stem on its own. So you don't really even need to add it, but you absolutely can if you want to. Now, I also stamped the third flower here, and once again, I used the semicircle stamp, but I stamped it differently. I stamped it vertically here. I also offset the semicircles, and I added a little circle in the open areas to complete this design. So this flower is super funky. It is very geometric, but I love it. You know, it's a very unique design. And that's the beauty of this stamp set. You can come up with all sorts of funky designs that you like. Okay, with the flowers stamped, I moved on to stamping the sentiments. And to me, these flowers needed big and bold sentiments. And they needed something, simple, a simple font. So I used one of my favorite stamp sets from Kathy Zelski. This is the Clean Line XL stamp set. I absolutely adore the font and also the size of these messages. I use them a lot for my cards. So for here, I picked hello and I positioned it so that it overlapped the leaves. Now the hello wasn't enough for me. I felt the card needed something else. So I also stamped the XOXO on the left-hand side of the hello to help balance the design. So let me explain. If you look at the flower on the right, it is bigger than the flower on the left. So the design is not really well balanced. So I needed to add more visual weight on the left to help balance and offset that difference in size. And that's why I stamped the XOXO. I used VersaFine Onyx Black ink for stamping the sentiment. Next, I felt like I needed to trim this panel down a little bit, so I used one of my Spellbinder rectangle dies and I cut it out. Doing this helped frame the design, and it also helps to pull the eye of the viewer in. Next, I decided I needed to add some color to the background. My card looked a little bit too plain, I would say. Not plain, maybe not colorful enough. So I wanted to add color to the background. I wanted to foam mount this panel onto a colored card base. Now, I first looked for a piece of colored cardstock that matched the color of the stamping, at least some color of the stamping. Of course, I didn't have any cardstock in that particular color. I really wish Simon Says Stamp would manufacture and begin selling this cardstock, the blush color and the cheeky color. It's very pretty. I don't have anything like that in my stash. So what I did instead, I decided I would ink blend a panel using that same ink color to match the color of my stamping. Now, my mistake here was to use the Spellbinder's Snowdrift cardstock for this ink blending. This is not the best paper for ink blending. It's actually pretty bad for ink blending and stamping. This paper is fabulous for die cutting, but not stamping and not ink blending, which really isn't surprising because Spellbinders is a die cutting company. Why would they have paper that's good for stamping, right? So my mistake. Anyhow, I blended it anyway, and it looked okay in the end. The other cards, I actually ink blended the card base directly instead of ink blending a separate panel and adhering that panel onto the card base. And that worked a lot better because the card bases were made using Neenah Solar White cardstock, which is a much better paper for ink blending. And if you look closely on the finished card, you can tell the difference between the ink blending on the different cards. So look closely and you'll be able to tell the difference between the paper. So I first wanted to ink blend the entire panel, to have a solid layer of color. But as I started blending, I felt like having just a part of the panel blended looked a little bit better. It added interest. I had that sort of like an ombre effect going on here. And I decided I did not need to blend the whole thing. I just blended a half, like a corner or two corners fading in to the rest of the panel. I foam mounted the stamped panel onto my ink blended panel, which I also adhere to an A2 card base. And next I used Spellbinder's sequins. I think these are in color Aura. And I added a couple of sequins onto the card. So the circle sequin shape went really well with the circle and the half circle flower shapes that I have stamped here. Now, I also used a new detail pickup tool from Simon Says Stamp. This is the Place and Score Embellishment Wand. So you have a wax tip on one end to help you pick up and position the embellishments such as, sequins or gems. And the other end is perfect for scoring paper. Now there's also another embellishment wand, the Place and Pierce. and it has a piercing end instead of a scoring end. So very convenient tools when you work with little embellishments. Now, I also like that both tools come in a plastic tube for storage. It also comes like this for shipping purposes, but I kept the tube for storage because it helps to keep the wax tip clean, and that will help it last a lot longer because it's clean, so it will be sticky a lot longer. So that's the look at the first card I have using the Geo Flower Building stamp set. I have 2 more cards, and I'll quickly show you the stamping process in case you want to copy them. They're pretty much identical, in terms of technique, but the flowers are stamped slightly differently. So here I'm starting by stamping the 2-petal shape. I'm using Cheeky ink. By the way, this is the exact shape that I will use on my 3rd card to stamp the leaves. So you can use this shape either way for petals or leaves, or you could probably even stamp a whole background using this shape or other shapes from the stamp set, or stamp a border. These shapes are very universal. I also stamped 1 more single petal, and I'm stamping the 4th petal using the blush ink. So here I'm first moving 1 petal away, and I'm also using a slightly darker ink to make an emphasis. And this adds a lot of interest to the card. Next, I'm going to stamp this other shape using yellow ink. And again, this adds interest to our flower. So you can see I'm overlapping the shapes. I'm creating new shapes and really having fun with the stamp set. I stamped this other shape just twice. I do not want to go all the way around, so I'm adding just 2 impressions, and I'm keeping this a little bit asymmetrical. Next, I'm adding the leaves using the light green, and also another row of leaves using the dark green ink. And I love, love, love the result. I just need to add the flower center here, and I'm using the smaller circle for that. I stamped Miss You and Let's Hang Soon sentiment in both black ink and gray ink for the sub-sentiment. The Let's Hang Soon sentiment or sub-sentiment helps balance the single darker color petal. So again, the design is not symmetrical, it's offset, and adding that sentiment helps round up the design. Now, I also ink blended the background using both colors. So I have yellow at the top and peach at the bottom. And I think, again, it helps to tie the whole card together. Now, my 3rd card is also a fun one. I first stamped the main shape in yellow ink. This is a pretty big shape, so, it takes center stage on a card nicely. Next, I added the leaves using the shape that I used for the petals for my card number 2. And again, I stamped the leaves in both light and dark green. And then I started to add additional petals to this flower. I stamped them in Cheeky ink, and I went all the way around. So I stamped them 4 times to complete the shape. And I love how these colors overlap and create new colors on the card. Here, I also added some standalone stamped circles. Now, I envisioned them as flower buds. So I have 1 open flower that's, beautiful and it is blooming. And I also have some smaller flowers that aren't yet ready to bloom. So here's a look at the finished cards created using the Geo Flower Building stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. By the way, there's a new release happening today with lots of great products. This stamp set is obviously my favorite, but there's a lot to choose from. So I encourage you to take a look and explore. There's a link to the release down below. Thanks so much for spending time with me today. I hope you enjoyed this video and you will give this idea a try. Love you guys, and I'll see you next time.